That smudge turned out to be a brand new comet heading our way that we're now calling Comet R2 SWAN. But SWAN isn't arriving alone.
Astronomers first thought it was an error, a glare, a glitch in the feed. But then the data held steady, and the object grew brighter. A body 100 times larger than anything near it, moving with impossible precision. They called it SWAN, though that name feels almost cruel for what's coming. It's not behaving like a comet, it's changing course, as if watching something. Now, its trajectory locks onto 3I Atlas, and if the readings are right, this isn't a visitor, it's a warning. The arrival of SWAN.
Of comet C 2025 R2 SWAN, as it travels past the stars Spica and the planet Mars.
They thought they'd mapped the sky. Then something massive showed up, something that doesn't play by the rules. It was first spotted on September 11th, 2025, streaking through the dark with a glow so bright that even people with backyard telescopes could see it. They called it SWAN, a name that hardly captures its scale. This object is not a comet in the traditional sense. Its size, its shine, and its behavior have forced scientists to question what they are really seeing. When the first data came in, observatories across the world turned their instruments toward it. They quickly realized SWAN's tail stretched across the heavens, almost 4 times the width of a full moon. That alone would have made it historic, but there was something far stranger. Another object, known as 3I Atlas, was already on its way toward the sun, coming from the opposite side of the sky. Both objects were expected to reach their closest points within the same 10-day window. The odds of that happening by random chance are so small that some researchers have quietly begun to use another word for it: operation. SWAN, officially labeled C 2025 R2, behaves like nothing known in nature. Most comets crumble when they approach the sun.
This episode is about Comet C 2025 R2 SWAN.
Their icy surfaces boiling away, but this one didn't. It held together, its light remaining steady, as though something invisible was shielding it. Astronomers began referring to it as the fortress. The brightness patterns coming from it seem controlled, almost deliberate, like tiny pulses of propulsion hidden in its tail. It is as if this object is maneuvering through space, adjusting its path with precision no random rock could achieve. Meanwhile, its smaller counterpart, 3I Atlas, continues to move in erratic bursts, showing sudden color changes and unpredictable surges in speed. The two objects now appear to be following paths that converge around the sun.
It can be difficult finding comets right after sunset because of the sky glow.
The question keeping scientists awake is simple. What connects them? If SWAN is a fortress, could 3I Atlas be a scout? Their timing, their direction, and their shared anomalies suggest coordination. Whatever their origin, they seem linked by purpose. And as the days pass, both continue to close in on the same solar corridor, hidden behind the glare, where human eyes cannot yet see what is really unfolding. The blind spot mystery.
A mystery interstellar object that was spotted by astronomers last week. It could be the oldest comet ever seen.
There are coincidences in astronomy, and then there are patterns that make even the most skeptical minds pause. When scientists plotted the incoming paths of SWAN and 3I Atlas on a star map, something astonishing appeared. SWAN approached from Aquarius, while 3I Atlas came from Sagittarius, two regions separated by a vast quarter of the entire sky. Yet both entered the inner solar system almost side by side, traveling along orbits that should never have intersected. They reached their closest approach to the sun within just 3 days of each other, a level of timing that nature almost never produces. Random comets arrive years apart, sometimes centuries.
The very next day, it was confirmed to be a comet, and that's why we named it R2 SWAN, and it was actually making its closest approach to the sun.
But this was something else. Astronomers began comparing data from observatories worldwide, searching for any natural explanation, and still, the numbers refused to make sense. Then came the blackout. Between October 8th and 18th, Earth's telescopes went blind as both objects slipped behind the sun's glare. During that 10-day window, the two cosmic bodies vanished from sight. This was at the exact moment they were closest to each other, and to the sun. No images, no readings, no confirmation. Only silence. To some, this alignment looked less like random chance and more like precision. Their trajectories, angles, and timing formed what scientists call a corridor, a narrow zone in space and time where two orbits meet perfectly. It is the kind of coordination that would require exact knowledge of celestial mechanics, far beyond ordinary probability. If this is coincidence, it is one unlike any seen before. But if it is not, then we may be witnessing something designed. A calculated rendezvous in the one place and moment when human instruments cannot watch. What could be unfolding behind that solar curtain remains the question that no one can yet answer. What NASA won't show about SWAN.
Newsfeed now talking about comet SWAN tail brushing past Earth, sending a debris field into our atmosphere.
When energy readings reached impossible numbers, scientists knew something was off. At first, researchers dismissed the strange bursts of light from SWAN as typical solar reflection, but the readings didn't match. SWAN wasn't just glowing, it was producing energy levels close to 10,000 gigawatts, far beyond anything expected from a frozen mass drifting through space. That number caught everyone's attention. To put it simply, SWAN gives off more power than the entire electrical grid of Earth combined. No natural comet behaves that way. It has a metallic sheen, a steady halo, and rhythmic pulses that repeat with the precision of a machine. Some experts have even compared its activity to a propulsion system like plasma bursts guiding it through space. Could it be controlled? That idea, once dismissed as fantasy, is now quietly spreading among astronomers. Many are wondering whether SWAN isn't a comet at all, but a form of advanced technology. And that is where things start to connect. If Atlas is acting like a drone, adjusting its path and speed, then SWAN may be the source of its commands. A much older, much larger structure that has been traveling for thousands of years, returning now in a timed cycle. With an orbital period stretching over 22,000 years, it could have passed Earth long before recorded history. Maybe it was even seen by ancient civilizations, leaving traces in their carvings and legends. Then, just when excitement reached its peak, data stopped flowing. NASA and the European Space Agency abruptly halted updates. Officially, it was due to the object's proximity to the Sun, a standard safety measure called solar conjunction. But internal leaks tell a different story. Astronomers were instructed not to release images or radar readings, and proposals for new observations were quietly rejected. That blackout only pushed independent researchers to act. Small observatories and backyard astronomers began coordinating privately, sharing raw data in real time. The more they looked, the more it seemed SWAN and Atlas were not moving randomly at all. They appeared to be aligning, perhaps even converging, which leads to the question no one can yet answer: what exactly happens when they meet?
Whole weeks apart. It seems that SWAN and 3i Atlas are not meeting anytime soon.
Controlled chaos in space. At first, astronomers thought it was a coincidence, a trick of reflected light or the result of solar interference. But as the weeks passed, patterns began to emerge that no natural object should display. 3i Atlas was not only moving, it was maneuvering. Its tail would flare up in bursts so sharp that satellites tracking it had to recalibrate. Each burst came with a distinct shift in color, as though something inside was responding to a command.
Right now, as we speak, 3i Atlas, an enormous glowing object the size of Manhattan.
This wasn't how comets behaved. Natural outgassing happened slowly, driven by sunlight striking ice. What 3i Atlas displayed looked more like control than chaos. 3 distinct accelerations were recorded, each almost evenly spaced, and each demanding more energy than a dozen nuclear plants could produce. Scientists couldn't explain it, at least not publicly. Then came the comparisons. SWAN, the larger object already under scrutiny, showed the same behavior, but on a scale 100 times greater. Its massive tail didn't waver aimlessly. It pulsed, forming symmetrical ripples that hinted at a kind of guidance system. Both objects, separated by millions of miles, began to shift their paths in subtle, deliberate arcs. And the strange part? Their movements appeared connected, as though reacting to each other's signals. What could synchronize two objects across such distance? Random chance seems unlikely. For researchers watching from ground-based observatories, the data painted a picture they didn't dare describe aloud. SWAN, enormous and steady, adjusting its trajectory.
Of comet C 2025 R2 SWAN.
3i Atlas, smaller and more agile, reacting with timed thrusts. Whatever these things are, they are not drifting, they are navigating. And if the direction they are heading means anything, then their paths are closing in on one another. Whether that meeting will bring answers or more questions, no one can say. But every night, the space between them keeps shrinking. The object that watches back. As SWAN and Atlas drew closer to Earth, old patterns began to resurface, and humanity's oldest carvings seemed to stir with recognition. Scientists turned their focus to ancient records, not because they were running out of explanations, but because the orbital path of SWAN appeared to trace back tens of thousands of years. Its cycle was measured in over 22,000 years, a rhythm so vast it echoed through ages most historians barely touch. When the calculations lined up with the end of the last ice age, questions emerged that science alone could not easily dismiss. At sites like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, early builders had left images of spirals and celestial shapes that appeared too deliberate to be random. Some experts began to wonder if those carvings might have been more than symbols. Could they have been memories of something once seen in the sky? An immense glowing body passing overhead while humankind was still learning to farm and build. Those thoughts unsettled more than a few researchers. The idea that what we call SWAN could have visited before, long before written language, carried an eerie weight. It suggested a connection between what we now track through telescopes and what our ancestors once watched in fear or awe. If that was true, then this event was not the first time Earth had witnessed its approach. It was a return. Behind official statements, there were reports of quiet movements in orbit. Observers in classified programs had begun monitoring SWAN more closely than most satellites. Word spread of a small probe launched from an undisclosed platform, equipped with instruments meant to scan through the dense coma surrounding the object. The goal was simple: determine what SWAN truly was. The results, however, were anything but simple. Roughly 1 million kilometers away from its target, the probe's signal began to distort.
The object, if it's technological, it would maneuver some signal, or it will have some artificial lights.
At first, technicians suspected interference from solar radiation, but then a sequence of readings arrived. It was sharp, deliberate, patterned. The last image sent back to Earth showed something impossible. The reflection of the probe itself mirrored perfectly, as though SWAN had captured its image and returned it. A moment later, the connection vanished. Engineers studying the data found indications of a field structure, like a web of energy enclosing the object. It behaved less like a natural phenomenon and more like a barrier, absorbing and scattering incoming signals. The term energy wall began circulating quietly among those who saw the raw files. One analyst described it as acting like a Faraday cage in space, capable of neutralizing any attempt to penetrate its surface. If the reports were accurate, then SWAN was not only enormous, it was aware of its surroundings. It seemed to react to intrusion, reflecting data back in perfect symmetry, as though testing whoever was watching. For the scientific community, that notion was difficult to process. Comets do not analyze their observers. They do not mimic human technology, yet the data left little room for other interpretations. Each new observation painted SWAN as something far more complex than a frozen mass of ice and rock. Its immense size, its repeating orbit, and now its apparent response to human probes all hinted at a structure built with purpose. Beyond coincidence. The further scientists looked, the less sense it made. Data from the Webb telescope painted a picture that no one expected.
Qualitatively speaking, of course, the Hubble Space Telescope.
When its spectroscopic readings came back, researchers noticed something strange in SWAN's chemical makeup. Its spectrum revealed traces of complex organic molecules arranged in patterns too precise to be random. In laboratories, these compounds form the scaffolding of amino acids, the first step toward life itself. What unsettled the scientists was not that organics existed there, but how perfectly organized they appeared. Each molecular band looked clean and symmetrical, as though refined through intention rather than chance. Comets normally look messy, with uneven distributions shaped by collisions and temperature swings. SWAN's pattern, however, felt designed. It led some researchers to question whether this vast body was merely a drifting object or part of a mechanism built for purpose. Soon a quiet theory began to circulate through academic circles. What if SWAN was not only a vessel but a carrier? A structure meant to deliver the raw ingredients of life wherever it traveled. If Atlas functioned as a smaller scout, mobile and reactive, then SWAN could be the archive, a kind of seed ship preserving data and organic matter through the void. The idea sounded extraordinary, yet it explained the balance between their movements. One acted, the other endured. Attention then turned to their trajectories. Independent observatories charting both paths noticed something difficult to dismiss. SWAN and Atlas were not simply passing through neighboring orbits. Their paths appeared to narrow toward a shared corridor, a zone drawing them near the sun at almost the same time. For two natural wanderers, such accuracy seemed too exact. It looked like choreography, as if they were converging for a meeting planned long ago. The more that pattern repeated across simulations, the stranger it became. Some experts proposed a technical reason. Perhaps both objects used the sun as an energy source, recharging or stabilizing through its radiation. Others imagined a form of exchange, with Atlas transmitting collected data to SWAN, which in turn might beam the information outward to destinations unknown. But there was another interpretation that no one could comfortably put into print. What if the alignment had nothing to do with them meeting each other, but with us finally noticing? For thousands of years, they may have moved unseen across the darkness, their returns spaced farther apart than civilizations last. Now, as Earth's instruments reached new sensitivity, the timing had changed. SWAN and Atlas approached when humanity could finally observe every signal. It felt less like coincidence and more like an invitation. The thought lingers behind closed doors in observatories and mission control rooms. If these objects are more than natural, then they are watching. And if they have purpose, it might now include us. The lunar signal mystery. The more scientists examined SWAN, the more it seemed to behave like a machine rather than a natural object. At first, its brightness was thought to be reflected sunlight, but instruments soon revealed a strange truth. SWAN wasn't only reflecting light, it was producing its own radiation, and not just any kind. It was emitting energy in a range almost empty in the natural universe, between soft X-rays and gamma rays. Nothing about this made sense. Comets and asteroids do not create such structured signals. Yet SWAN released rhythmic pulses that appeared timed and deliberate. The pattern was so precise that some engineers began to suspect intent. Could it be a form of transmission? Or worse, interference? Ground-based telescopes tried to capture the data, but some arrays in Australia briefly went dark.
The Webb telescope is created by some of the brightest minds in the world, and all of them are going to be watching at the edge of their seats.
Sensors were blinded, and systems reset themselves as if overloaded. One engineer compared it to being jammed, like a signal trying to block detection. That possibility unsettled everyone. If it was capable of disrupting equipment across vast distances, what else could it do? Was this radiation harmless, or could it be a tool meant to control how it was seen?
This is something that we didn't realize before, and they also move without creating an exhaust or breaking the sound barrier.
SWAN wasn't behaving like an object drifting through space. It seemed aware of observation. Some began calling it the opposite of the silent Oumuamua. While that one passed quietly, SWAN appeared loud, forceful, almost territorial. Then came the next discovery, and it sent researchers into chaos. A sudden burst of energy erupted from SWAN, directed not toward Earth, but at the Moon. Amateur satellite trackers caught it first. It wasn't random static. The energy wave was layered. It changed in rhythm, tone, and polarization, forming patterns that repeated every few seconds. To specialists, it looked structured, almost like information being sent. But information to what? When NASA's Deep Space Network analyzed the data, they confirmed the burst was aimed at a specific region on the lunar surface. It wasn't the first time this location had puzzled scientists. The area is known for its gravitational anomalies, dense zones beneath the crust called mascons. These sites have baffled geologists for decades. They are heavier than expected, as if something massive is buried deep beneath the lunar surface. Now, with SWAN's signal targeting that exact region, theories took a darker turn. Could something under the moon be responding? Or had it been waiting? For years, those mascons were treated as natural leftovers from ancient impacts. But if SWAN was activating them, it could mean those formations were never geological at all. They might be engineered. That idea changed everything. Suddenly, the moon didn't seem like a passive satellite. It might be part of a system. Each new reading only deepened the mystery. The emissions from SWAN have not stopped. Instead, they now pulse in longer intervals, sometimes aligning with fluctuations observed in Atlas's trajectory. If the data holds true, something enormous could be controlling this sequence. Earth's hidden response. Something began to stir across the planet, though few understood it at first. The changes weren't happening in the sky, but deep within the Earth itself. Magnetometers across continents started picking up strange pulses that came every 43 seconds, each one perfectly matching SWAN's radiation bursts recorded in space. The timing was too precise to ignore. It felt as if the Earth was answering back. Soon, seismographs in Antarctica, South America, and parts of Asia began to react as well. They detected ultra-low frequency vibrations that didn't fit the pattern of normal tectonic shifts. No earthquakes, no volcanic activity. Just a steady rhythm that seemed to echo SWAN's emissions. For researchers, it was both thrilling and terrifying. If these readings were real, then SWAN wasn't just an object passing by. It was somehow influencing the planet itself. Then came the most unsettling part. Migratory animals began to change course all at once. Birds flew in confused formations, whales shifted their paths, and even insects altered their movements. It was as if something had rewritten their sense of direction. Some experts suggested that solar storms might be to blame, but that explanation fell apart when the patterns continued without interruption. Every pulse from SWAN was followed by a reaction on Earth, as if a connection had been re-established after being silent for ages. A few scientists quietly admitted what others refused to say aloud. Earth seemed to be resonating, as if awakening to a memory buried deep within its crust. The debate over what caused it continues, but one thing has become certain. This is no longer an event happening far away in space. SWAN's influence has reached us, bending magnetic fields, shifting the rhythm of the planet, and maybe even preparing something larger that still waits beyond sight. The lock and the key. The timing, the silence, the precision seemed all too deliberate to be random. Scientists began to connect dots they once dismissed as coincidence. What if Oumuamua, that odd object from 2017, wasn't just a visitor, but a signal? Some began to see it as a lock, something designed to test readiness. Then came 3I Atlas and SWAN, moving in perfect rhythm, as if they were two parts of a single plan. One small and fast, like a scout. The other vast and guarded, carrying power that no one yet understood. Now, when SWAN released its strongest pulse, both Voyager spacecraft suddenly broke protocol. For a few brief moments, they sent bursts of unreadable data before returning to normal. Engineers said it was a glitch, but the timing matched SWAN's pulse exactly. It looked less like a malfunction and more like something had been reactivated, as if those probes had been waiting for a signal since their launch decades ago. That thought unsettled even the most skeptical minds. The James Webb Telescope had been built to look backward in time, to capture the first light of galaxies and understand how the universe began. But instead of showing us the past, it started showing us reflections, patterns that pointed inward, toward our own solar system. The strange synchronization between SWAN and 3I Atlas didn't seem accidental anymore. The theory that emerged was both simple and terrifying. Oumuamua had been the lock, 3I Atlas, the key, SWAN, the force that turned it. Together they formed a mechanism far beyond human design. Some experts suggested it was an ancient system, something that returns every few millennia to observe, to measure, or perhaps to reset. If so, then our detection of it may have been the event it was waiting for. For the first time, humanity may not be the one looking outward. The evidence suggests that something out there has been watching us, timing its return for when we could finally notice. And maybe, in the grand scale of things, that moment has arrived. The activation. SWAN's pulses continue to move through Earth's magnetic field, sending coded waves that touch everything from the crust beneath our feet to the instincts of migrating animals. Each pulse, each echo, seems to remind scientists that Earth has been part of this unfolding event longer than anyone realized. SWAN isn't drifting aimlessly, and Atlas isn't passing by without purpose. Together, they behave like elements of a larger system, one that treats Earth not as a bystander, but as a participant. Whether the purpose of this connection is communication, activation, or something entirely beyond comprehension, no one has been willing to confirm. Silence from the world's major space agencies only adds to the growing suspicion that far more is known than has been revealed. Data archives have vanished. Official briefings have turned into quiet redactions. It is as if the moment SWAN began interacting with our planet, the narrative was taken out of public hands.
Comet SWAN at this point is moving fast through the night sky and makes its closest approach to Earth around October 20.
Scientists who once shared findings openly have now gone silent, describing their work only in vague terms. And maybe that silence is the message itself. If so, then what does it mean? Could observing these events have triggered a chain reaction, one that draws attention not just from Earth, but from whatever sent these objects in the first place? Perhaps what humanity thought was discovery was actually an invitation, or worse, a response. Because if observation itself carries consequence, then the very act of looking up might have already sent a signal across the void. The story of SWAN and Atlas is still unfolding. Stay with us. You will want to see what comes next. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.